Hare Krishna and Namaste to everyone. And today we're having this amazing discussion online with a very nice friend of mine and amazing devotee. He is ISKCON deity worship minister, and he has so much to share. And today we're not just gonna talk, but we're actually gonna bring very interesting discussion, very interesting question, because that question is many people asking, and basically on the internet is very hot topic. So today we're going to talk about what's the difference between spirituality and religion. And I would like our friend and guest today, Nisimha Kavacha Prabhu, to start bringing this topic to the discussion. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thanks Ananta Vrindavan for inviting me to discuss this topic. One thing I would like to say before we get too much into the topic is Ananta Vrindavan has got to be my favorite videographer, especially of Vrindavan and other spiritual topics. Very, very tastefully done videos. So I really appreciate the wonderful work you're doing, and that you've done it for many, many years. And it seems that the videos just get better and better over the years. So thank you for the great pleasure you're giving to so many devotees, and myself included. So I guess the topic of spirituality and religion, it really begins with definitions, really understanding what do we mean by spirituality and what do we mean by religion. If you look at the term spirituality, it seems like, say for instance, you take a dictionary definition and it talks about dealing with the matters dealing with the self or the soul. The soul meaning the living entity inside of the body. But we see as the years have progressed that this understanding seems to have expanded and broadened, and in some ways you might consider it's become somewhat watered down. Even now we see that spirituality can refer to lifestyle, like a healthy lifestyle, doing yoga or anything like that. But actually, you see spiritual books where they'll if you go into any sort of new age bookshop and you look at spiritual books, they might tell you about crystals or different types of healing stones or so many different icons and symbolism from various traditions around the world, but very little information about the self or the nature of the self is there. So at least from the perspective of Gaudiya Vaishnavism or from the Vedic perspective, spirituality specifically deals with the self, the soul, and the spirit self, and also the evolution of the spirit self, reawakening this understanding of our true nature and reuniting with the Supreme Lord, or with God, Krishna, in the case of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And in essence, religion refers, if we look at a very succinct definition of religion, religion means the science of understanding God. It means, how to understand God. So spirituality is essentially, in that sense, not that much different from religion. It seems like it's really the same thing, because both of them have the same goal in that we understand the nature of the self, and we then connect the self with God. And so that's the practice. Now, of course, in our practices in Krishna consciousness, there are various methods you can employ to reawaken this spirituality or reawaken this understanding. And of course, this begins with things like studying of the sacred scriptures. And of course, all our understandings need to be in relation to the study of the sacred scriptures. And there's one verse which points out that if our understanding of spiritual science is not in relation to the sacred scriptures, then it's actually just a disturbance. And we see that in the modern age, there's so many so-called spiritual groups or so-called pursuits of spirituality where people might, be interested in nature or nature spirits or good health or like yoga societies and things like that. But there's not really much focus on the spirit self. It's more to do with the external material body. And this is while it's important that we maintain good health so that we can happily pursue our spiritual practices, it's not the essence of it. It's not really what spirituality is about. It's helpful and it's supportive of our spiritual practice, but it's not the main spiritual practice.
I just want to ask you quickly, like you did mention about the spirituality, the symptoms of spirituality, like nowadays, where it's more about like some symbolic things, like even like comes to like some stones or yoga for health and all that stuff. But could we say the spirituality nowadays is kind of a watered down, true spirituality where it also does, like describes in the Vedas?
Yeah, there's definitely. I think one of the real essences there is because the line of teachers, as we see it's described in the scriptures. There's a nice verse, because this is a Gita kind of a format. There's a nice verse in the Gita which talks about this in the beginning of the 4th chapter of the Gita, where Krishna explains to Arjuna that because the disciplic succession has become broken, therefore the spiritual science has become lost. And that's also what's happened now. If you look back previously in the Vedic age, there was a very, very strong disciplic succession, and all the leaders in the land, the kings, etc., were led by gurus who guided them in the spiritual path. But unfortunately, we don't have that situation now. And there's definitely a quest there. There's definitely a strong interest in people developing their spirituality. But because they don't have spiritual leaders as such, they don't really know what spirituality is. So that's one of the key elements of developing spirituality, is to have a guide who actually understands spirituality.
So since you were talking about the guide, is there mistakes a religious person can do which can like really make the whole thing is instead of being a positive, being a disturbance? Like could you talk about like what religion actually done negative, in the sense like what mistakes they done to kind of put the people off? And I guess the people going to the spirituality, so-called spirituality, it's, I guess, what would be the reason why it's happening.
Yeah, again, it gets back to the leadership of any religious institution, or not even an institution, but any religious guide. If they themselves aren't strictly following their practice, then people aren't stupid. They see that. They see that they're not actually following the practice. Therefore, why should I follow them? And they're no better than me, so I can just follow my own path. And we see over the years, this has happened not just in spiritual practice, but also in administration of countries, in kingdoms, etc., where the leaders have not upheld the principles they're expecting others to uphold. They've not followed a spiritual path or whatever. Therefore, wholesale, the general population rejects them. So one of the important keys to guiding people in any field, not just in spiritual life, but in any field, is to yourself uphold the values which you're trying to encourage others to follow. You need to actually become an example for others to follow, if you like. And this is the way, because Krishna also declares that in the Gita. He says that, whatever acts the great man does, the common man will follow. So, if we want to guide people, the first step is to, ourselves set a good example.
So you mentioned about the guide, and like a kind of the guru would be one of the main principles in the religion as well. Now, if we talk about spirituality, I know there's maybe not so much understanding of that factor in there. Could you talk about it? Like, is spirituality does also based on this principle? And if let's say people are more thinking of them identifying themselves are more like a spiritual person, how can we help them to to get that guidance like that? Could you talk about that, please?
Yeah, so especially in this day and age, we see there is an increasing interest in people developing themselves and people improving themselves, and so this quest for spirituality is there. But one of the, as I mentioned just before, one of the big challenges is actually finding someone who's a qualified guide, and so this takes a bit of, sometimes can take a bit of endeavor, because they don't necessarily, fall out of trees as such. You need to really make an active search to find someone to guide you spiritually, and also it helps to have some basic understanding of who is a qualified person. Now, there's a nice verse in the Upadeshamrita, or the Nectar of Instruction, which explains that sober person who can control the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, the pushings of the tongue, the belly, the genitals, that person, that they're qualified to guide people or lead people. So we need to look for those persons who actually have those attributes. It's no good just taking guidance from anyone, and especially we find in this internet age, you can see so many people on the internet propounding their philosophy, their belief, whatever. Yet it's very difficult to actually understand or to assess what they're really like. And even we see the scriptures mention that if someone's going to take shelter or take guidance from a spiritual personality, they need to study them very carefully. And also, for the person who's going to give guidance, they need to study the person they're giving guidance to ensure that person is actually capable of taking and following guidance. So it's very, very important that the proper relationship is established. Without the proper relationship, then nothing will work. So very important to understand and establish that relationship.
Great, and I guess we want to admit or say that the spiritual people are they have a quite like lots of understanding of the religious beliefs as well, and they are like on the path of developing the good qualities. They're on the path of developing some understanding of the spirit, but I guess they do require guidance, since they are by themselves, in a sense, like fighting with the mind and in the senses, where as if we take like a typical religion, there is different tools, different processes, different hierarchy to help them, to guide them through. But of course, being a religion, sometimes the system fails because of the people may not have qualities to lead or to guide, and then basically it's all just becomes the cheating like that. So before we finish, I just want to ask you, do you consider yourself a spiritual person or a religious person? I think we'll lost
Fundamentalist, you might say. I must overcome the influence of the modes of material nature. You got me there?
Yeah, we got you back.
Yeah. I'm aspiring to be a God-conscious person. I'm aspiring to be a spiritual person. And of course, as long as we have the material body, as long as we have the material mind and senses, there's always a struggle there, especially if we're under that influence. But the idea is to try to, through our spiritual practice, to regulate the mind, to regulate the senses, so that we actually come to the point where we're no longer influenced by these things, or the influence of these things is minimal. So, yeah, that's the spiritual practice, is to try to minimize the influence of the external environment and become more situated in this internal consciousness, which is focusing on our.
I think we lost you again there. I just want to add to great. Thank you for this great answer. I just want to add a little bit from myself. For me, the spirituality has it's kind of a preview. Like if you just about to watch the movie, and they show you the preview of that, the highlights. So the spirituality has this preview of something, these high principles of where everyone is equal in the name of God, and everyone is beyond and above the different like designations. But of course, it's not as deep rooted in the heart as what it needs to be. So the religion, really, if we take it as a religion, sometimes they use different things to based on the really based on the where the country of your birth, based on your nationality. But eventually, of course, once the higher religious person, they do understand, they do get realization of every, of the how to say, universal principles, like the love of for God, and then all the living entities is part and parcels, and the brothers and sisters. So in the spirituality, those principles are kind of there from the day one, but they not being maybe deep rooted in the heart. So they're more external, like, but they are like a preview of what it, of something which needs to come. And if you go through the process, life, maybe even life after life, because it does take a long time for the soul, for the person to really become this amazing flower, of love for God, for love for Krishna, like that. I remember. I remember, this is kind of just a example. I remember meeting one sadhu in Vrindavan, and then I asked him how I can be surrounded by the people who is spiritual, who is very in tune with the spirituality, and with trying to love God and love other living entities. And he said to me, well, you know what, when you open your heart, so as a flower, you open your heart, when you purify your heart and the heart becomes open like a beautiful flower, then you have the bees coming to collect that honey. So in the same way, when you open your heart, using this process of purification, you either go through the religion, or you become a spiritual person, and then work using the authorized processes to purify your heart. Then you will be surrounded constantly by the atmosphere and the people who is like a bees, who is collecting the honey, and who represent those highly advanced souls, like that. So so that's something I wanted to share. So anyway, thank you so much, Nisim Kavachi Prabhu, and thank you for this beautiful discussion. And I'm sure that we'll have so many more discussions to come. And thank you, and Hare Krishna, and Namaste.
Thank you.